Vladimir Putin has warned Donald Trump that renewing military action against Iran would carry what the Kremlin described as inevitable and extremely damaging consequences, not only for Iran and its neighbors, but for the entire international community. The warning was delivered directly, president to president, during a phone call that lasted more than an hour and a half. Kremlin aide Yuri Ushakov told reporters in Moscow that Putin highlighted those consequences explicitly and said the option of a ground operation in Iran seems completely unacceptable and dangerous. That is the president of Russia telling the president of the United States on a direct call that escalation in Iran would cross a line Moscow considers non-negotiable. The specific reference to a ground operation is the sharpest element of the warning. It tells Washington that Moscow is not just tracking the naval and aerial dimensions of the conflict. It is watching for any signal that the United States might consider putting troops on Iranian soil. Ushakov's language left no room for ambiguity. Completely unacceptable and dangerous is not diplomatic hedging. It is a red line delivered through a presidential aide's briefing and sourced to AFP. The warning landed on the same day Brent crude sat above $112. The Strait of Hormuz remained contested, and Qatar Energy's force majeure declaration was still in effect. Putin is telling Trump that escalation would make all of that worse. The phone call was initiated by the Russian side and lasted more than an hour and a half, according to Ushakov. That duration signals substance, not protocol. A 90-minute call between two presidents at war on adjacent fronts is not a courtesy check. It covered Iran, Ukraine, economic cooperation, and at least one proposal that could reshape the diplomatic calendar in both conflicts. The previous publicly confirmed call between Putin and Trump took place on March 9th and lasted nearly an hour. That call was initiated by the American side and focused primarily on the escalating conflict around Iran. This time, Russia called first. On Iran, Putin told Trump that his decision to extend the ceasefire was correct and would give negotiations a chance while helping to stabilize the situation. That is Putin publicly validating one of Trump's decisions during a war where nearly every other international voice has criticized the American posture. It is also strategic. By praising the ceasefire extension, Putin is reinforcing the pause and making it politically more expensive for Trump to break it. If Trump resumes strikes after Putin publicly called the ceasefire correct, the framing shifts from American initiative to American reversal. Ushakov said Russia is firmly committed to providing all possible assistance to diplomatic efforts and has proposed a number of considerations aimed at resolving differences over the Iranian nuclear program. Trump confirmed the offer from his side. Speaking to reporters in the Oval Office, Trump said Putin offered to help on the issue of Iran's enriched uranium, which remains a key obstacle to any deal to end the war. Moscow has previously offered to take enriched uranium out of Iran, a proposal that would address Washington's core concern without requiring Tehran to dismantle its enrichment infrastructure. That formula is significant because it gives Iran a path to compliance that does not look like surrender. Tehran keeps its enrichment capability. The uranium leaves the country under Russian custody. Washington gets the security guarantee it says it needs. The offer sits on the table. Whether Washington picks it up depends on whether Trump sees the nuclear file or the blockade as the priority. Trump's response to Putin's nuclear offer was revealing. He said he would rather have Putin be involved with ending the war in Ukraine. "Before you help me, I want to end your war," Trump told reporters. That sequence is striking. Putin offers help on the most sensitive file in the Iran conflict, and Trump redirects the conversation to Ukraine. It could mean Trump does not consider the nuclear issue urgent enough to accept Russian mediation. It could also mean he sees the Ukraine file as the bigger political prize. Either way, the exchange tells Iran that its nuclear program was discussed between the two most powerful men in the world, and that the American president chose to talk about something else instead. On Ukraine, Putin proposed a ceasefire timed to May 9th, Victory Day, the anniversary of the Soviet Union's role in the defeat of Nazi Germany. Ushakov said Putin informed Trump of his readiness to declare a truce for the period of Victory Day celebrations. Trump endorsed the idea. Speaking to reporters, Trump said he suggested a little bit of a ceasefire and that he thought Putin might do it. He then asked reporters whether Putin had already announced a ceasefire. Putin announced a similar truce last year that lasted 3 days, but was not agreed with Kiev. The proposal is symbolic, but symbolism in a war that has lasted 4 years carries diplomatic weight. A ceasefire on Victory Day would temporarily halt fighting on the anniversary of the last time Russia and the West were on the same side. The irony is not subtle, and Putin knows it. He is offering a pause framed around the one historical moment where Moscow and Washington share a narrative of common purpose. Ushakov said Trump told Putin he believes a deal that would end the conflict in Ukraine is already close. Trump has made similar claims before, but the context this time is different. He is saying it during a call where Russia offered help on Iran's nuclear program and where Putin praised Trump's ceasefire extension. The two leaders are trading diplomatic capital across 2 conflicts simultaneously. Putin gives Trump validation on Iran. Trump gives Putin optimism on Ukraine. Whether either delivers is a separate question. But the exchange itself shows how deeply the two wars are now entangled in the relationship between Washington and Moscow. Putin was not entirely conciliatory on Ukraine. At Trump's request, he spoke about the current situation on the front line and reiterated his position that the objectives of the military operation would be achieved in any case, though a negotiated outcome would be preferable. That is Putin saying he will win either way, but is willing to negotiate the terms. The formula has not changed since the early months of the invasion. What has changed is the context. Putin is now offering it alongside diplomatic proposals on Iran and a Victory Day ceasefire, packaging the hard line inside a broader framework of engagement that makes Moscow look more constructive than combative. The call also covered economic and energy cooperation. Ushakov said the presidents discussed prospects for mutually beneficial projects in the economy and energy, noting that several large-scale economic initiatives are already being discussed between representatives of the two states. That detail is easy to overlook inside the Iran and Ukraine headlines, but it matters. Energy cooperation between the United States and Russia during a global oil crisis triggered by a war both countries are involved in is not a routine topic. It suggests that behind the public confrontation over Iran and Ukraine, there is a parallel channel where commercial interests are still moving. Putin also expressed sympathy with Trump over last week's shooting incident at the White House Correspondents' Dinner at a hotel in Washington. Ushakov said the Russian leader strongly condemned the crime, emphasizing the unacceptability of any form of politically motivated violence. The inclusion of this detail in the readout is itself a diplomatic gesture. It humanizes the call and tells the American public that Putin responded to the incident with the same language any allied leader would use. Whether that framing is genuine or calculated, it softens the image of the call from adversarial to collaborative. The call covered 2 active wars, a nuclear mediation offer, a ceasefire proposal, an energy partnership discussion, and a condolence message. That is an extraordinary range for a single conversation between 2 leaders whose countries are on opposite sides of at least one of those conflicts. The breadth of the agenda suggests both sides see the relationship as the channel through which the most consequential decisions of 2026 will be shaped. Iran and Ukraine are no longer separate files. They are connected through the same phone line, the same diplomatic currency, and the same 2 men. The fact that Russia initiated the call is itself a signal. The March 9th call was initiated by the American side. This time, Moscow called first, came with a ceasefire proposal, a nuclear mediation offer, and a public warning against escalation in Iran. Putin is positioning Russia as the side with the most proposals on the table and the most willingness to engage. Whether those proposals are serious or performative, the optics are clear. Moscow called, Moscow offered, and Moscow warned. Washington answered. So this is the picture. Putin warned Trump that renewing military action against Iran would have damaging consequences for the entire international community. He called a ground operation completely unacceptable. He praised the ceasefire extension as correct. He offered help on Iran's enriched uranium. Trump said, "End your war first." Putin proposed a May 9th Ukraine ceasefire. Trump backed it and said a deal is close. Energy projects were discussed, a condolence was delivered, and through all of it, the warning on Iran sat at the center. Russia has now told the United States, on the record, through a presidential aide's briefing carried by AFP, that escalation in Iran would be met with consequences Moscow considers inevitable. The warning is no longer implied, it is stated, and the question it leaves behind is whether Trump heard it as a threat, a negotiating position, or the opening move in a deal that covers both wars at once. The answer to that question will determine what happens next at Hormuz, in Ukraine, and between the two men who just spent 90 minutes deciding the shape of the world. Subscribe to WLA for daily geopolitical analysis.